All right, so thank you for coming. This has been a little bit of a while since I've done a talk here. Um, this topic always seem to fall into it. Given Alistair was going to talk about rendering React on the JVM, I just thought that for people who haven't gone down this path yet, they might not know that there is Nashorn or even Rhino or anything like that, and so I just thought I would give you guys an intro into what Nashorn is, what it does, and it's going to. I'm just going to talk about some of the small gotchas that have gotten us along the way, just a bit about how we use it, and a tiny bit about what's coming up in Nashorn as well for Java 9. So, yeah, I guess the crux of this talk is that, and the reason I picked the picture is that this crossing over, and there's a lot of good stuff that Java brings to Nashorn and Nashorn brings to Java, and so the two interop reasonably well. I think, maybe not as well as, say, Groovy or Kotlin, but certainly they do quite well together. And when you think about, as Alistair mentioned, there's a wealth of libraries, not just on the JVM side, but on the JavaScript side as well. It makes it really worthwhile investing in. Look, you probably all know who I am. I am the person who writes the welcome email when you join the meetup group, and then do a whole bunch of other things with all these very good volunteers of ours. I've done a talk before using Gradle to build your JavaScript web apps. So using Nashorn on the JVM is not an old thing to me. I've used it basically prototyped front-end web apps and then moved those front-end web apps to the server side. Through that, that's been a bit of fun. That's where I've been able to use this stuff. I currently work at a company called MyWave, and what MyWave do is that they have a platform where they write these extensions, and the extension, their platform is basically a JRuby server. And that platform then has these extensions written in JavaScript. And the reason they're in JavaScript is that JavaScript's quite ubiquitous. So you can give this to any developer, a web developer, and say, you can write an extension for our platform. And so we've picked the JVM because you can, and this thing called the, I'm going to get the number wrong, but the JSR 223 script engine manager thing. So basically anything that any language on the JVM that exposes this script engine interface, you can use with our platform. And it's exactly the same thing that what Alistair was talking about before. He was just taking advantage of that. So the Nashorn object that he was referring to, that's just wrapping up a script engine manager. And I'll show you that coming up. The whole idea, MyWave's like a bit of a JVM polyglot nirvana to me at the moment, because we get to basically write code, and we have a lot of interop challenges. So we'll have for example, a JRuby, or rather we'll call out to a Java library that returns a Java primitive array, and then we will pass that through Ruby, and then pass that through to Nashorn, and then try to do a for each on that, and we'll expect certain methods to be there, and they're not. So I'll talk a little bit about that as well in this talk. My handle is Never Sleeps. Sometimes I do that, but you can get me on Twitter or GitHub, and if you've got any questions afterwards, or get me on Meetup as well. So the script engine manager, this is where it's at. Basically, I'm going to just spend the next few slides going right from the grassroots bare bones stuff. Your script engine manager, it looks a little bit like this. You've got these libraries up the top. I actually got a clicker. I might as well use it today. All right, so you've got these libraries, the script engine, and the script engine manager. So what you do is you instantiate a new script engine manager, and you wrap that up, and you pick the these engines that you want to use. So the Nashorn thing that you saw in the closure talk before was just a variable name. So here I'm going to use engine. In Alistair's talk it was Nashorn. But basically you're just wrapping up a Nashorn instance. If you're using anything prior to Java 8, that would have been Rhino, or even, I think you can actually put the word JavaScript and it'll pick the right engine that for JavaScript that's based on the platform that you've got. So, yeah, this is pretty much what this is the Java version, not the closure version of interacting. But basically, you've got the eval method. It's not a Lisp, so you kind of do the object first, then the operation, and then we're just saying 2 plus 2. Hey, guess what? That's equal to 4, and we can. This object is actually comes back as an int from the script engine manager. And I'll show you, it kind of has a little bit of smarts with certain object types. The cool thing, which I will show you right now, is that you can get a bit more advanced, and it knows how to deal with JSON objects, like return them as maps, and there is a JS object abstraction that you can get back. What I've got here is a very simple hash. So it's basically another JavaScript object. These keys are just numbers, and I just want to order the strings, the values that those are mapped to. So I've got a bit of, this is all JavaScript, so it's using, the nice thing about JavaScript too was that it actually, most people that I've worked with forget that or don't know that JavaScript's already got a lot of the filter and map that Java only got recently in the Java 8 streams stuff. So basically, you can do a lot of, cool, like just, approaching lists in a nice way and all that kind of thing. So I'm using JavaScript to do all the heavy lifting of the array. And all I'm doing is mapping over that, and basically the whole idea is to give me back these strings back in the correct order that they're supposed to be. So I go engine.eval, it's going to give me this object back of words. What do you think it's going to give me? All right, so I got welcome to Mail JVM, July 2016. And let's do it. Oh, it's not quite. This is... who still uses Firefox? That's kind of a bit biased, but yeah. So about 3 of you, good. But this is what, like Google Chrome, if you go and look at an array object, the Firefox console, I noticed, seems to still just print you out this when you introspect this on the console. So this is just the string representation of JavaScript on that. When you look in Google Chrome as opposed to Firefox, it'll actually unwrap that for you. But what we've got to do is do a bit of stuff. So this is the extra bit. This is the bit that the Nashorn guys have worked on to be the bridge between Java and JavaScript. And what this thing is called the script object mirror. This is the package name, not that you'll ever have to remember it because we've got IDEs now, but that's all in the jdk.nashorn bit down there. And so what that means, script object mirror, it's got all these functions. I'm not gonna, it's just huge, but these all look like things that you find in like freeze and gets and get own keys, is array, is empty, is function. These are all things that you would use, like that you'd see on this, what's the term in JavaScript, the prototype object that you know, this is, I want to know about what a JavaScript thing is. Most of these things, I alluded to this JS object, that's that abstraction. Behind everything in the script engine manager, however, there's an object called a binding, and a binding is basically just a map. You can put elements in a map. You can You can get them, you can remove them, which is kind of handy if you. I'll go into that a little bit later. Why that can be handy, but basically, these are just things that you call it into. So whether I'm going to get an object back in JavaScript, and as you know in JavaScript, right, I can have a object that's got strings and functions and arrays and a whole nested bunch of things, and this is kind of what lets me iterate through all those things. So the solution to fix our problem is basically to do some casting and introduce our script object mirror. So now we've got some more functionality. So we can go to the words thing. Are you actually an array or a function or whatever? We can ask it now what it is in JavaScript. And it actually comes back, and when it comes back with true, we can actually start going, give me all the values. So because this is a binding, so that's a map, we can just do like get the values, and it'll give me all the values of that are coming back out of that map that we're getting returned. And then I can use the Java 8 API instead, and I can now stream and map over those things, do a toString on them, and then just join them all together so that we end up with welcome to Melb JVM July 2016. So the next thing I wanted to talk about that also sometimes gets a bit forgotten is that you can call some good stuff from the Java side of things. So when Java 8 came out and the Nashorn demos were coming out, they were talking about doing some cool stuff with JavaFX, and unfortunately that didn't really take off at all. So, you know, if you need a really quick charting API, the JavaFX charting API is pretty decent, and you know you could actually whip up a desktop app just using JavaScript alone, and it's actually a nice replacement to the original JavaFX language if you ever got around to using that. But here, I always find with JavaScript, you've still got this horrendous date object, and you can't really do much. And it's a bit of the pot calling the kettle black because Java didn't have a good native library until the java.time stuff. So, but the thing being is that if you're already taking advantage of this, there's no need to go and import a JavaScript library that handles date times for you because you've already got one in the JVM, so you might as well use it. So I'm going to just talk about how you get to do that. It's a little bit of code. Can you guys all see that? Okay, good, because I can't enlarge it. So what we do is that we can tell Nashorn, they expose this Java object. So you know how when you're in the browser, you can have things, like you can go console, that's exposed in your browser objects. You can go window, you can go document. Those things are all things that Chrome or Firefox has added into your JavaScript environment. Likewise, the Nashorn environment adds things in, and so this Java, capital J Java, you can use that to basically get info about the class path and get actual Java objects to work on. So I'm going to use the Java time local date, and we're just going to get the time that it is now. And the other thing too is I've just put this all together. So this is just one big string concatenated together that I'm feeding in. It's just a JavaScript string. It doesn't really matter if it's a string or if it's a file reader reference. Nashorn can deal with both kinds of things. But anyway, let's see. So we can print out stuff. We're basically still in JavaScript land, except that when we're doing this local date now, we're calling into, that's a static method on local date. So we're just calling straight into that. It's giving us a local date object. The neat thing about the Java time thing is that you've got all these adjusters and you can deal with periods and intervals. So we're using this last day of the month adjuster, and we're basically asking for that. And then saying, okay, well, give me the last date of the month adjuster, and then with that date time now that we got before, then just use that and give me the last day of the month. and then down the bottom, so here's today, and that's the last day of the month. And so I didn't really have to do anything extra. I didn't have to import any libraries. It's there ready to be used. And so you can start thinking about other things that Java's got. So I've done stuff with servlets and the servlet API. There's there's things around security, and there's like very mature libraries just in all shapes and sizes around where Java is. So you can access all those things, and you could even give this to a non-Java developer, and they've got basically instant access to these APIs. But let's just say you did hire a JavaScript developer and you said to them, well, look, we use this thing called Nashorn, you'll be right. And they'll be like, okay, well, I know how to use Moment. Moment's a time library that I've never used it, but I did a quick Google, that seems to be popular. So they'd be like, okay, well, I want to use this library, how do I do it? So another method that Nashorn adds in is this load method. And what load does is that you can load anything here. I've just downloaded moment.min.js and put it in the same directory and run it out of there. But it also knows how to deal with files that are on your class path, so resources there. It also knows how to deal with HTTP URLs and HTTPS URLs, so it can download JavaScript libraries from anywhere. So yeah, you can basically just tell Nashorn, go and load stuff, and then it will go into your context and add whatever the library is. So because of that, loading in Moment, I've got this Moment function that I've got over here, and I can now start interacting with the Moment.js library, and yeah, all right, tell me the start of the day from now, so it'll tell me how many hours have elapsed since this day started. And I made this slide a few hours earlier, so at that time it was about 5 o'clock. So that's when this got printed out. So yeah, that's just a way that you can interrupt both ways. You've got the best of both worlds, and I think a lot of people, what I've experienced so far, and it might not be for the other people who use Nashorn, I don't know if many people actually know about this or take advantage of this quite a bit, but it's certainly worth definitely taking advantage of. Sorry, yeah, question.
What sort of a JavaScript runtime is ES5, ES6?
Yeah, so it's ES 5.1, so ES6 or 2016 or 2015 or whichever flavour you want to call it, isn't supported as of yet, but they've recently done some work to bring that in. So there is a bit of a story about that. I'll get into it at the slide. But basically, Java 8 ES 5.1 with some little sneaky thing that I'm still trying to figure out what's happened with that. They've basically put this into NetBeans a bit early. So I've got a slide on that. I'll talk about it that then. You can also, though, that said, you can do polyfills. So if you ever look at the Mozilla documentation for JavaScript, and you'll see at the very bottom of every, say, like array.map, it's like, oh, you don't have this one, so take this function and stick that in, and then you'll have that function on all your array objects. So you can basically, and we do this at MyWave, we use polyfills where we need to. We don't add everything because that would slow stuff down, but we do put the polyfills that we need. I've seen some talks online where people have used the Babel Transpiler. So they've used that, and then they've basically just feed their scripts in through to that, and then that emits 5.1 compliant JavaScript, and they run things fine. They can run React apps and everything using that. So that would tide you over for now, just as it is. And if you get any library that's trying to use all the new features and it's not compatible, yeah, you could just run it through like the Babel thing. That would be your base thing that would get you going. Yep.
So this load is basically when you are saying next statement you are loading another library.
Mm-hmm.
Is it also going like both of this library going to share a global namespace? So if I declare a variable in a global namespace in one library, would it be accessible by the other library?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. So, so the question, just if it didn't come out on the the recording or whatever, was basically, if you load a library in like Moment, and it does add this to your namespace, does that mean that every other Nashorn library that you've got loaded also get that Moment, and can they start doing things to that? And the answer is yes, but there is, aside from load, there's another load method, another variant. I might bring up the web page after. It's something like, I've just forgotten, and I should know it because we use it as well, but load with global, or something with the word global in it. So load global, and you can put things in a global context. If you want things in a private context, you can actually create a second script engine manager and fire that up and run that separately. Of course, then you start having to think about thread safety, which JavaScript never ever had in mind. So then so it's just something, again, a caveat you might have to concern, but there's nothing wrong with that, and you probably want to do that if you're, say in our case where we've got extensions and different users all deploying different extensions. We don't want people to corrupt other people's namespaces. I can't really speak to the memory concerns, unfortunately, or whatever that other performance impact would be of doing that, but that's kind of how you ideally want it, right? So that, and have a way that you can share the common objects, that, like, say, I don't know, again, like taking a servlet example, there's a thing about, just as well, like I did mention, so I've wrote a project where I've had a script engine manager that's been fired up from a servlet request, and there's a best practice advice to wrap that in a thread local, so that every servlet instance has got its own one, so they're not stepping over the top of each other and everything's more thread safe. Yep. Any other questions before I go on? Annie? Mm-hmm. That's a very good question. I would say it would be, because if I didn't block on that load, then straight away to the next line, then things would blow up. So I would say that it is. And if you wanted to do some stuff asynchronous, like maybe you want to do some preparation, maybe you'd want to get a warm script engine manager going first before you started serving requests at it. So maybe load up all the libraries before getting it into your servlet pool or whatever it was that was servicing your requests. There is another way to load things as well. So Nashorn also knows about things like the file path, and I guess one of the, I'm not sure if this is just how people have used it. People want to take all their JavaScript, combine it into one big file, minify it. That's not really, nothing wrong with anything about that. But the one thing that you don't get if you just give eval commands and you use load, or if you use load, you're okay. But if you use if you're just adding JavaScript scripts together as a string and then just giving it to this eval command, then you're basically, you can't, when there's errors, Nashorn can't tell you what line number, or if it tells you a line number, it'll be line 2474. And so using the load stuff at least lets you, using this load stuff lets you get line number and file context about where things failed. So while you're in development mode, you want to not concatenate and load each file individually. What I've got on this slide here is a different way to do it. So eval can actually pass in a reader. So this URL reader comes with the Nashorn SDK, but you can pass it in any Java reader object. But if you use the Nashorn ones, so this URL reader, so I basically just turned the path into a URL and passed it there. Then when it fails, I will get some context about what line number, what file it was in, so I don't have to go digging around into this, this crazy stack trace and look for things. It does expose natively these __dir and __ file globals, so you can always ask Nashorn where it thinks it's at. So it's kind of very Ruby-esque, I guess, in some ways like that. yeah, just as an aside, there's another thing called Nashorn require, and basically if you want to load any kind of CommonJS or Node modules, you can actually check out this GitHub project, and it's only 2 months old, but you can basically pull in anything that's an NPM module. So yeah, for better or worse, left pad, you know, why not? Yeah, you can use that. So there's people breaking out some cool libraries to work with Nashorn as well to make the ecosystem a bit nicer. So I touched on this a little bit before. This goes back to the comments around context. What do you get in, you know, these are the things that you get. And when we've seen these, like, I guess when we're developing a product and we want to go to JavaScript developers and we want to say, oh, well, you know, use our thing, it's fully, you know, ECMAScript 5.1 compatible, but there's all these guys over here. What do we do about it? Some of them are good to have, because if you take away these Java importer, there's some cool stuff where they help you deal with Java objects, and if you're using different libraries on the JVM, you'd probably want to keep them around or at least re-expose them. So maybe you didn't want to call it Java, but I don't know, you wanted to call it Oak so that people didn't know about it, and then you could, you know, __ Oak, and security by obscurity, right? That you could only access this object from within your own scripts, so that you could give your users who are using your, you know, you could maybe want to expose only certain features of the JVM, and only maybe pre-package some classes like the Java.time, give that already to them so that they didn't have to go and try and load Moment.js for themselves and bring in whatever library they wanted to. So what we actually do is we actually go through when the script engine manager starts. Remember how I told you that there's just a script engine manager is just backed by this binding object, which is just a map. Well, what that means is basically you can just do a, you know, .remove on that. So what we do is we've got these listed in an array, and we just iterate through and just remove those so that our Nashorn scripts, our client scripts can't call those things. We can do some things too, though. So we can, prior to removing them, we could, there's some libraries that we deal with that return primitive arrays. And so we've got the opportunity where we can basically inject some features to say, hey, if you're going to return this, don't, you know, you don't go do sort of almost like monkey patch it a bit and say, go through a different path and get through another way. The thing, I think the one thing I wanted to clarify though was basically there is quit and exit. You can't do those things in a running JVM. You can't do a system.exit. So a lot of people go, oh, well, I want to stop, you know, using Java, because people will then just go to, you know, bring up the system object and do system.exit. But you can't, they've actually already created a sandbox around that, so you can't do things like that. But I guess if you want, you probably do want more protection and start thinking about other layers of security that the JVM offers, like, what's it called? Basically having wrappers around the security manager stuff that basically prevents access to certain classes. That will still work here and prevent people from running your code. All right, so this is just a thing about a problem we ran into. I talked about primitive objects and arrays. So we've got a Neo4j library, and it returns back at some stage it returns back something with a primitive array. Comes back through JRuby, so it's some kind of array, gets passed through to Nashorn, and then we try to go, okay, well this looks like a JavaScript array. Let's do some .map or filter functions, and they aren't there. And you go, well, okay, well what else is there? It's obviously responding to for each. So it can't just be an integer or a string. And what turns out is that Nashorn's added a few nice little things to to Nashorn to deal with things, one of them being the for each, but that's basically about it. So to a lot of my colleagues who aren't primarily Java developers, they get this object back and they're just expecting it to be an int, especially if they're a Ruby developer as well. They're expecting every object to have methods on it. Having that would be disconcerting. But there is a way, so one of these, there is something that's in there. This it's in the link anyway, that you can wrap thing in a bindings object, and it basically makes the Java object turn into a JavaScript object, so that you've got all the methods that you can call on it. The future. So going on to this question. So this was a pretty good story. This only happened or was announced on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. The guys from NetBeans, they're basically adding a whole bunch of support for all the new JavaScript platforms, and they needed ES6 support. So they were using Nashorn up until now. And you may have remembered at the last news from the last meetup, we talked about this thing called Gradle and Truffle, and that was basically this offshoot called Oracle Labs, where they go off and they do this hardcore JVM development. They do all this cool stuff with JRuby and Node and R and Python, and they've got all the. They're basically, their mandate is, I guess, to make those dynamic languages run as fast as what a statically typed language like Java does. And so, basically, long story short, the NetBeans team called in a favour as from Oracle Labs to basically bring in that support. So the stuff that they did in the Truffle for Nashorn, they brought it into, or rather they did it for Truffle, they backported it into Nashorn, and now in the next version of NetBeans 8.2, which is currently in early access, you can actually write ES6 code, and it passes using this new interpreter. I downloaded the new NetBeans. I tried to use it to see if there was a way to specify a different interpreter other than Node, but I couldn't figure that part out. So, and it kind of seemed a bit weird that why would you give people, I don't know, why would you pre-release it? But something that when I was at Java 1, when Java 8 got released, they were saying that you wouldn't have to wait for Java 9 to come out to wait for the next version of Nashorn, because script engine managers, they're just jars. So when I go and say script engine manager Nashorn or Groovy or whatever, that name's coming supplied by whatever jars on the class path. So that's how I can get different versions of Scala or Groovy running against alongside my Java apps. I've got a suspicion that maybe it's that they've basically backported the stuff into Java 9, and they've made a Java 8 compatible Nashorn jar, and then just basically using that in the new NetBeans to do its syntax stuff, which I think is pretty cool. Which means it's really close. But if you want to really see it in action, you can download Java 9 because it's already in early access. And one of the engineers, I'm going to try and pronounce his name and probably wreck it, but Sundararajan, okay, told you I'd wreck it. He basically posts these little screencasts on Twitter, and they're pretty awesome. So here he's using all the new arrow syntax in ES6. So it is there, and it's waiting to be going. So, and like I said before, if you don't want to wait for that or want something a bit more reliable, then just use the Babel recompile it down. All right, and with that, so yeah, I hope I've gotten across to you. You can run just about anything. Using JavaScript via Nashorn, and you can get all your Java objects into JavaScript and vice versa. There's a few little things you have to be mindful of, but it's not too annoying once you know what's there, what to look for. ES6 support's coming, which is fantastic, and yeah, you can use Polyfills. So by all means, go and use these libraries, and there's no reason it's ready for production. You can get help online for different things. I've got a slide with some resources, but you'll also keep an eye on the Gradle and Truffle VM because I think that's pretty cool. So yeah, there was some images that I used, some resources. This is the first one's probably better than the actual real Java tutorial. That's just everything you need to know about Nashorn and all the interop stuff that I would have loved to have time to cover. The Nashorn devs, so Weekend is James Lasky, who's the lead of the Nashorn team. And then, yeah, the second guy, I'm not going to wreck his name twice, but he's also posting all the demos and stuff like that. The Oracle got pretty decent documentation. There's stuff about all the security, how you can lock down your JavaScript apps from accessing Java objects. And there's the Nashorn dev mailing list, and they're pretty reasonable about replying to that. And also on Stack Overflow, they seem to be pretty active as well.